Association said today that 2 bullets shot from behind and from the same gun killed Kennedy. This comes after interviews with 2 pathologists who performed the autopsy at Bethesda Hospital in 1963. This discounts conspiracy theories of a second gunman. It also disputes the single bullet theory of Pennsylvania U.S. Senator Arlen Specter.
Our job was to find the facts and the truth, and if the facts and the truth are somewhere else, frankly, so be it. If somebody finds any evidence that what the commission concluded was wrong, so be it.
Specter was an attorney for the Warren Commission.
Well, the so-called Gang of 7 is at it again. The group of
Kennedy was only shot from behind and by one person. Dr. George Lundberg interviewed the doctors who performed the autopsy on President Kennedy.
Both bullets struck from behind. No other bullets struck the president. A single assassin fired both bullets. The eyewitness accounts and the scientific forensic evidence are indisputable.
The report supports the findings of the Warren Commission in 1964 that it was a single gunman. If you'd like to read more about this report, it's in the May 27th edition of the Journal.
As to why the head went backward is the jet effect of the explosion of the head forcing it backwards.
The new interviews reinforce the conclusion that Lee Harvey Oswald fired the 2 bullets that killed President Kennedy. This contradicts a recent book written by Charles Crenshaw, a Dallas surgeon who says he participated in efforts to revive the president. He claims that the wounds looked like they were caused by frontal shots. But in the AMA Journal, the 4 physicians in charge of Kennedy's care at the hospital also break their 29-year silence and strongly criticize Crenshaw. One of them states he cannot even remember Crenshaw being in the room, and another calls Crenshaw's claims ridiculous. Lundberg, the AMA Journal editor, saves his strongest criticism for the movie JFK and its producer, Oliver Stone.
Put my hat off to him for skillful filmmaking, but I think he's done the country a terrible disservice in rewriting history falsely.
Clearly, these new interviews will not convince many skeptics who doubt the official version. But with the doctors in Dallas and the pathologist in Washington now on the public record, the burden of proof seems to have shifted back to these skeptics. Dr. Timothy Johnson, ABC News, New York.
75 and the evidence the 2 pathologists made public today deals only with the issue of where the bullets came from, not whether there was a conspiracy. It is not likely to be the last word. After all, the idea of conspiracy spawned an industry. Here's ABC's Jim Wooten.
The President of the United States is dead.
From that awful moment onward, for 10,000 days now, the country's obsession with Kennedy's murder has subsidized a supermarket of conspiracy theories, tracking dozens of different payoffs and plots and cover-ups and all manner of evil enterprise, all lately reinforced by the power of JFK, in which the president is assassinated by a conspiracy that includes Lyndon Johnson.
Just maybe Oswald is exactly what he said he was. A patsy.
And maybe in this improbable universe, almost any answer is plausible to someone. Kennedy killed by Castro's agents, by anti-Castro Cubans, by the Mafia, by Jimmy Hoffa, by the CIA or the FBI or the KGB, or by anyone except Oswald acting alone. Whether all this rises from paranoia or the profit motive or simply from a hard search for difficult truth, it has always been a seller's market.
People are still reading books on the Lincoln assassination conspiracy, which occurred over 100 years ago. This is not going to die. I don't know if it ever will die.
And with polls showing most Americans dubious of the official explanation, this cottage industry of Kennedy conspiracy theories, this national obsession, isn't about to be closed down by another defense of the Warren report. Jim Wooten, ABC News, New York.
In a moment, the other news.
Books written and they jump to the top of the bestseller list, not necessarily because of literary merit, but because people are hungry for somebody who may seem to be telling the truth.
The truth or simply more theories? Regardless, Mankiewicz is probably right. The idea of a conspiracy in the public mind is probably here to stay. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
One Nightly News continues in a moment. President on JFK at the Dallas hospital. Jacqueline Adams reports.
By the time the world learned that John Kennedy was dead, the president's body, at his wife's request, was on its way from Dallas to the Naval Medical Center at Bethesda, Maryland. There, pathologists performed a 4-hour autopsy. Today, the prestigious Journal of the American Medical Association published Doctors James Humes and J. Boswell's recollections.
The second bullet entered the back of the head and exploded the right side of the head, destroying the brain with a surely lethal wound.
Outraged by distortions in the movie JFK and a series of books, the pathologists broke a long silence. No, they said, neither the military, the FBI, nor the Secret Service ordered them to alter their findings.
Yes, Dr. Humes burned his blood-spattered original notes, but only after he'd copied them verbatim. And yes, they said, the Warren Commission was right.
Both bullets struck from behind. No other bullets struck the president. A single assassin fired both bullets.
Immediately, conspiracy theorists cried lies.
This paper is cooked. This whole case is being cooked since 1963. It's a lie.
Former Governor John Connally, wounded that day in Dallas, agrees that authorities made lots of mistakes. But he shares the pathologist's fear that the bigger mistake would be for young people to believe filmmaker Oliver Stone's version of JFK.
And I think that's an evil thing for him to do. And I think he went beyond the bounds of decency and went beyond the bounds of poetic license and making statements of that kind in that movie.
29 years later, can two retired pathologists convince the doubters that one gunman killed JFK? Probably not. All they want, they say, is to make the scientific facts available and hope for the best. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, New York.
In the wake of the racial
Kennedy. Oliver Stone's film, JFK, has intensified discussion of who killed President Kennedy and whether his assassination was the result of a conspiracy.
I'm lost, boss. What are we saying here? We're saying that when Oswald went to Russia, he was not a real defective. That he was an intelligence agent on some kind of mission for our government and remained one till the day he died. That's what we're saying. Therefore, because Oswald pulled the trigger, the intelligence community murdered their own commander-in-chief. Is that what you're saying? I'll go you one better, Bill. Maybe Oswald didn't even pull the trigger.
At the heart of the debate is the lone gunman theory, which says that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone when he shot the president. One of the central questions raised by critics of that is the direction of the bullets that struck the president. The official government report by the Warren Commission concluded that all shots that hit Kennedy and Governor Connally, who was riding in the president's car, were fired from the school book depository behind the limousine. But critics have long claimed that the home movie made at the time of the assassination, the so-called Zapruder film, shows Kennedy was struck from the front. That and other evidence have been used to support the theory of a second gunman. Today, the Journal of the American Medical Association jumped into the fray by publishing the first interviews with the two doctors who conducted the autopsy on President Kennedy. It is their first public comment on the assassination. They spoke to writer Dennis Brio and Dr. George Lundberg, editor of the journal and a pathologist himself. And Dr. Lundberg is with us now. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Lundberg.
My pleasure. Thank you.
These claims about the JFK autopsy evidence have been out there for years. If they could have cleared it up so easily, as your interview suggests, why have these two doctors waited 29 years to do it?
Well, I don't really know why they waited
Did
that
you ask
long.
them?
Oh, yes, we asked them. They said, for example, that all the information was in the Warren report, and if it was there in black and white and has been verified by a variety of committees and other groups over the years, at least 4 previous times, if the public didn't believe that, why would they believe them if they came out? They also, I think, were a little afraid of what the media might do to them. They're private people who went along with their regular lives, very successful pathologists in their own way, and weren't really that willing to confront repeatedly. But finally, they'd had it. I mean, they felt like they'd just been beaten on too long by too many people, so they were ready to talk.
You said that the Oliver Stone movie insulted the doctors who did the autopsy. How did it insult them?
It insulted their professionalism. Well, it was a fabrication. It implied that they were part of a conspiracy. It showed them at their potential worst when they were really not at their worst at all. These are respected physician pathologists who happened to be in the United States Navy at that time, but I feel that it insulted not just them, but pathologists in general, forensic pathology specifically, the United States Navy. It insulted military medicine with the idea that a professional doctor in the military would be subject to some superior officer dictating that he or she not do their professional duty. It was an insult in many ways.
Now, one of these two doctors, particularly Dr. Humes, who was in charge of the autopsy, he says he told you in the interview that there was no interference with him during the autopsy. There was no mysterious senior official there guiding it or directing him to produce certain results.
That is
or
correct.
to distort the finding. Just enlarge about that, because that is a point the Oliver Stone movie makes with particular drama.
That is true. Dr. Humes states that he was in charge of the autopsy, that no one interfered, no one directed, he did it. Dr. Boswell was there with him. He confirms this exactly. I have known Dr. Humes since 1957. This is a man that nobody's in charge of. He's a very strong person, highly competent, very much in charge of what's going on.
There was a third doctor, Dr. Fink, who took part in the autopsy,
That is true.
and he refused to be interviewed. What reason did he give for refusing to be interviewed?
He didn't give us a reason. He lives in Switzerland at this time. We invited him to come for the interviews more than once. He simply declined. He did not indicate why.
How do you answer the charge that was made at your news conference today? The author of one of the conspiracy theory books came and charged that the American Medical Association is now part of the cover-up, as he put it.
I assumed that that would be the charge brought against us. I don't see any other one that anyone could make that would have any credibility at all. First place, the American Medical Association has not taken a position on this. This is a journal effort. This is not an AMA effort. Second, the Journal of the American Medical Association is 109 years old. It's as respected a medical publication as there is in the world, and I believe that the people, the doctors, the media, the people in general believe what we publish, and I believe what we publish stands the test of time. I also have been there 10.5 years. I'm a pathologist. I've done forensic pathology as part of my pathology. I stand by this report professionally myself as well. I think we're going to blow them away.
You have a personal interest in blowing them away? I mean, did you personally do this because you didn't believe there was a conspiracy and you wanted to demonstrate that?
No, I personally did it.
Blow away the Oliver Stone movie?
No, I personally did it because I wanted the medical literature to be the place for the truth. I wanted doctors around the world, the medical libraries, the universities to have access to the truth on our pages. That's why I pursued Dr. Humes and Dr. Boswell and Dr. Earl Rose for 7 years in order to get this story in our pages. When we went into the interviews, I didn't know what was going to be said. So when it came out this way, this is what we reported. Had it come out another way, that's what we would have reported.
Okay, let's go to some of the evidence itself. Why were the two doctors you interviewed so convinced that the bullets struck the president only from behind?
Because of clear-cut, simple forensic evidence. The first bullet that struck the president was in the back of the neck or the upper back near where it meets the neck, and it had an abrasion collar, an area of bruising which was present grossly, was present on photographs, and is present microscopically. That defines a wound of entrance. The bullet struck no bone and came out in the front of the throat, going through the windpipe on the way, with a wound of exit at that point. The second bullet struck the back of the skull, producing a beveling effect in the bone. Now, beveling means that if a high-velocity bullet is going to go into the skull, it will enter the skull at that point with a small hole, and when it comes out that side of the same skull, it makes a larger hole. Then when it goes on through the brain, comes out on the other side, it makes a small hole where it hits the inside of the skull and makes a larger hole in the outside. And that's exactly what was found in the head. It's shown by description, shown by photographs, and by x-rays. That is a sine qua non. It's absolutely diagnostic. There is no other possible explanation. 2 bullets, only 2 bullets, both from the rear and from an angle from upwards towards downwards. Has to be one rifle, 2 bullets struck the president, no bullets from anywhere else, no other angles.
What grounds do those two pathologists have for saying it had to be the same rifle?
The Zapruder film demonstrates that in a very short period of time, the 2 bullets were fired, and they were from the same angle.
But that isn't evidence from the autopsy.
That is correct. This is, well, that's true, but in an autopsy, you look at the other things as well. You talk to the doctors at Parkland about the tracheostomy they did. Dr. Humes and Boswell said they'd seen the Zapruder film 30 or 40 times. That's additional evidence. Ballistic evidence showed that the 2 bullets that were found...
Of course, they saw the Zapruder film long after they had performed the autopsy.
Of course, long after, but they continued to put this together, and it supported the evidence that they had at the autopsy.
How do they deal with the question, which has often been raised and continues to be raised, that some people thought there might have been an entry wound in the throat, not an exit wound, because the actual wound was destroyed when the doctors in Parkland Hospital in Dallas performed the tracheostomy to open an airway for the
If the wound in the front of the throat was an entrance wound, where is the exit? There is no exit, and there was no bullet within inside. Also, there was no evidence that it was an entry wound. There was no abrasion collar as defined by the Blue Ribbon Committee that looked at the results that were still there in the photographs of the tracheostomy in 1968.
And yet Dr. Charles Crenshaw, who was present in Parkland Hospital in the emergency room during the efforts to resuscitate the president, says, and he's written a book about it, that it was an entry wound. The bullets came from the front. Now, he saw the body before the autopsy.
Unfortunately, nobody in the media has asked him why he thinks that, because the evidence, the reasons that would allow a person to draw that conclusion were not stated by Dr. Crenshaw in the book. They were not stated in any interviews I saw spoken of. I don't think he's been asked the right questions. Surgeons typically are really good at taking care of patients who've been shot. They're really bad at forensic evidence. They typically don't recognize it. They haven't been taught it. They destroy it. They don't take pictures of it. They don't write it in the charts. By and large, they don't. The pathologists have hours to examine that. The surgeons have minutes. They have to take care of a sick patient who's been injured. I think that's the basic explanation.
These 2 pathologists, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, these 2 pathologists who you interviewed, they are capable of saying on the evidence that the only 2 bullets that hit the president came from behind, but they're not capable of saying that those were the only bullets fired at the president.
No, there may have been many other gunshots in Texas that day, but none of them hit the president.
No, but in other words, the evidence they've given you is not conclusive proof that there wasn't somebody firing from another direction who missed.
There is only conclusive proof that the president was hit by only 2 bullets from one direction.
Yes. But everybody there, including me, and I was there, heard 3 shots that day.
Well, and there were, in fact, 3 cartridges found upstairs, and I imagine there was a 3rd shot that missed, but probably from the same direction.
Just on a logical point of view, in terms of evidence, they can't, and you can't, as a result of these interviews, definitively say that there was only one person shooting that day at the president, can you?
No, I believe we can say there was 1 rifleman, 1 rifle, 1 direction, 2 shots from the back that hit the president. Whoever else may have been shooting, I have no idea.
How does Dr. Hume explain, because much has been made of this as evidence that there was something fishy going on at the autopsy, that he destroyed his own autopsy notes?
It's easily explained. Dr. Humes did not wish anyone in the future to profit off of the president's blood on bloody autopsy notes. As a pathologist, I know that when one takes notes in the autopsy room, there's blood on your gloves, and the paper often gets bloody. Dr. Humes was very concerned about someone using the president's blood for personal aggrandizement or profit. So he took his notes, copied them completely, perfectly, and then destroyed the original notes while retaining all of the original information, simply getting rid of the blood.
Does that give you, as a pathologist yourself, and thinking this as a great historical moment, does that leave any questions in your mind that somebody would destroy what was clearly a piece of historic evidence?
Not the least bit. I think when we see what the conspiracy theorists have done for their own personal aggrandizement, for public recognition, for paranoia perhaps, or for profit with what they've been able to come up with, I can imagine someone trying to make a great deal out of the president's blood and portions of the blood. I can understand Jim very easily doing
but
this.
There weren't conspiracy theories around that evening, at least in that autopsy room, were there? There were
none there, but I think he was a seer about what might come in the future.
Mm-hmm. What do they say about the moment that Oliver Stone makes much of? Dramatizing in the movie, you actually have a hand coming into the frame and depositing a pristine bullet on the gurney. What do the doctors say about that?
We did not ask them about that particular part. Our discussion with them about the JFK film itself was rather limited. We were trying to get at the facts.
Have they seen the movie themselves?
Dr. Humes had seen the movie prior to our interview. Dr. Boswell had not. I do not know whether he has now. Dr. Humes tells Dr. Boswell in our article that, Jay, if you go see this movie, you better take a tranquilizer or something in advance because it's going to drive you bananas.
What did he say himself about to you about the depiction of the autopsy scene in the movie?
Hoax, lies, madness.
Why don't these doctors come out and say all this now in public? I mean,
I hope they do.
I just want you would like them to. Did you?
We invited them. We urged them to. I've gone after this story for 7 years. When we got it, we urged them to come on television. I called them several times. Called them the day before yesterday. Said, "Would you change your mind? Come with us to the press conference, or do a telephone hookup or something." They said, "No, this story is our story. It's in the medical literature. That's where we wanted it. We're not interested in the rest of it. We're not going to have books. We're not interested in personal fame or aggrandizement. We don't want to make money off this thing. So this is our definitive statement. We invite the media to try to have better luck than anybody else has so far."
As there are so many people disposed to believe conspiracy theories, do you think they're going to believe these two men speaking through you?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I think the mainstream of America probably now will begin to come back away from the conspiracy theory towards the theory of a single gunman, although whether Oswald, what he was doing in New Orleans and what all those other things were, I have no way to comment on. But the fringes I don't think we can deal with, but then you always have fringes. But mainstream America, I think, will come away from conspiracy and begin to believe the truth.
Oh, Dr. Lundberg, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm John F. Kennedy are breaking a wall of silence to tell the world they are convinced the president was killed by a lone gunman, just as the Warren Commission concluded some 3 decades ago. Pathologists James Humes and J. Thornton Boswell spoke to the Journal of the American Medical Association. A journal editor spoke to reporters today.
I can state without concern or question my agreement with Drs. Humes and Boswell that President Kennedy was struck and killed by 2 and only 2 bullets fired from one high-velocity rifle. Both bullets struck from behind. No other bullets struck the president. A single assassin fired both bullets. The eyewitness accounts and the scientific forensic evidence are indisputable.
The pathologists apparently came forward because they were angry about the movie JFK, which depicts the assassination as a broad conspiracy. Today, a nephew of the slain president blasted NBC for showing autopsy pictures on its nightly news yesterday. Representative Joseph Kennedy of Massachusetts called the broadcast outrageous. Texas, Journal of the American Medical Association, but Dr. Cyril Weck, who's been studying the assassination, disagrees with those findings.
There's not one forensic pathologist, no matter which side he or she is on, who who has not said that this was one of the worst medical legal autopsies ever done.
Leck believes there were at least 2 shooters and that the CIA may have been involved.
Well, there is no end in sight, tonight at least, in Pittsburgh.
Kennedy discussed their findings in public. The American Medical Association released an exclusive interview with the doctors today, and what they revealed supports the Warren Commission's conclusion of a lone assassin.
The President of the United States is dead.
Since the first news reports from Dallas, the country has been obsessed with theories about President Kennedy's assassination. Now, nearly 29 years later, the doctors who examined his body have broken their long public silence. In interviews with the Journal of the American Medical Association, the Navy pathologists denounced the latest conspiracy theory put forth in the movie JFK.
Both bullets struck from behind. No other bullets struck the president. A single assassin fired both bullets.
JFK, the movie, theorizes that Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone and that more than 2 shots were fired. But the AMA and the 2 Navy doctors say medical evidence clearly supports the lone assassin conclusion of the Warren Commission. Today, the chief author of the commission's theory applauded the AMA's report.
When these autopsy surgeons come back at this stage in their careers and they make this statement, and it is reviewed by medical experts and confirmed that there were bullets from above and the rear, I think that is very helpful.
The AMA says it hopes the doctors' published interviews will help calm assassination conspiracy buffs, but it may fuel still more speculation about John Kennedy's death.
Now, the AMA today described Oliver Stone's film JFK as skillful film fiction, but an insult to the Navy doctors who performed Kennedy's autopsy.
Authorities made lots of mistakes, but he shares the pathologist's fears that the bigger mistake would be for young people to believe filmmaker Oliver Stone's version of JFK.
And I think that's an evil thing for him to do. And I think he went beyond the bounds of decency and went beyond the bounds of poetic license in making statements of that kind in that movie.
29 years later, the 2 retired pathologists probably won't convince the doubters that one gunman killed JFK. What they want, however, is to make the scientific facts available and hope they'll be believed. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, New York.
In other news this morning, Vice President
Kennedy. 2 of the pathologists who performed the official autopsy say only 2 bullets hit Mr. Kennedy, and that they were fired by one person who was above and behind the president. The doctors made these first public comments in some 29 years to Dr. George Lundberg, the editor of the Journal of the American Medical Association. And earlier today, here on Good Morning America, Charlie Gibson asked Dr. Lundberg if he went into the interviews with any preconceived notions.
I didn't, and the reason is that they'd been silent so long, I wondered whether there was something they were really concealing. I felt like a lot of the other people around the country, hey, if there's nothing to conceal, why are they concealing it? And after I'd seen the movie JFK, I was wondering, hey, this was pretty impressive. A docudrama, maybe there's really something to this. So I went in wondering what we were going to find out. But we found out that the truth of the Warren Commission is still the truth as regards the autopsy.
As for one nagging question about the Kennedy assassination, why the original autopsy report was destroyed, Dr. Lundberg says the doctors were afraid the report would become some sort of sick souvenir. So they burned it. Overseas this Wednesday morning, Thailand's military is still cracking.
Yes, go ahead.
Pathologists who performed the autopsy on President Kennedy speak up about the conspiracy.
Pathologists who performed the autopsy on President Kennedy 28 years ago have broken their silence. And as CNN's Richard Roth reports, the doctors support the conclusions of the Warren Commission.
It is one of the many controversial aspects of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the autopsy. Breaking a wall of silence, two leading pathologists who performed the autopsy spoke to the respected Journal of the American Medical Association. Their conclusion, based on the bullet wounds, remains the same as just after the autopsy.
I can state without concern or question my agreement with Drs. Humes and Boswell that President Kennedy was struck and killed by two and only two bullets fired from one high-velocity rifle.
From above and behind the motorcade, say the pathologists who declined to appear at the news conference. Through the medical writers, they denied being pressured while performing the autopsy. But as physicians, can't rule out all the conspiracy theories.
The autopsy findings cannot state which one person fired the rifle, whether there were other shots that missed, or whether Lee Harvey Oswald worked with the New Orleans mob or the CIA or Fidel Castro or anybody else.
It appears the doctors decided to come forward angered over the Oliver Stone movie JFK, which describes a conspiracy including a controlled autopsy. The medical journal pathologist who interviewed them called it skillful film fiction.
We hope that this presentation today and Mr. Brio's two JAMA articles will help to calm the ardor of the honest conspiracy theorists who have simply not had access to the facts.
But that's not likely. In the press conference audience was an author who says there were several hit teams in Dallas.
This paper is cooked. This whole case is being cooked since 1963. It's a lie.
Conspiracy buffs say the tracheotomy performed on the president obliterated any chance of determining whether there was a frontal entrance bullet wound. They laugh at the so-called magic bullet theory that Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally were struck by the same bullet. But the governor agrees with the autopsy findings.
This report that comes out clearly verifies, authenticates, ratifies the Warren Commission report.
Everyone connected to this case believes the pathologist interviews will not in any way close the assassination controversy. As Governor Connally says, people will be talking about it 100 years from now. Richard Roth, CNN, New York.
In the Los Angeles...